Good afternoon. This is Tommy Ruke, and for you who were aware that I had my hip replaced, I am back in the office and everything's doing well. But this is just a basic introduction to trucking. Let's move on now. Let's talk trucking. I stand up in front of a lot of people and wonder, look in the audience, how much of you all know about trucking as far as who's participating in the audience? One of the advantages of doing it the way we're doing it now as a part of Foundation, most of you all have a great interest in trucking. A dear friend of mine said, well, why don't you ask them a test question? I said, well, what's a good one? He said, see if they know what a reefer is. And when I asked that question the first time, standing in front of an audience, most of them younger than my children, they had a lot of people smile, knew what reefers were, but did not know anything about trucking. So that's a bad question. Same thing with fifth wheel. They're used to fifth wheels, and some of those people would want to have spare wheels. So when you're dealing with trucking, you're dealing with certain terminology that we have to be with. So if you think your boss is a kingpin or lives in New Jersey, if you think Bob tells a bird, next page. Okay. If you think Deadhead's the Grateful Dead groupie, if you think you can cure a headache rack with an aspirin, or a single axle truck only has one axle, or a straight job has anything to do with sex, or you sleep on a flatbed, or you plow a field with a tractor, or you're Brady's 7th round pick was a sleeper in an NFL draft, a 1-ton truck weighs 1 ton, or a road gator you find in the Everglades. If you think any of those or don't know this terminology, then you don't know trucking. Next page. Terms are important. Understanding these terms and how they affect the insurance for truckers shall be part of all the agents and underwriting consideration when writing trucking insurance. So what we're going to do for the most of this program is look actually at pictures of trucks, so that when you look at pictures and look at applications or talk to insurers, you can visualize what we're talking about, how you're underwriting it, and what the significance of these various things are, so you can better relate to the insured. Let's look at the big rig. This is the famous 18-wheeler. They are 10 wheels on the tractor, and there are 8 wheels on the trailer. This is the typical risk that you're dealing with. If you look on the side of that truck, you can see where you have some nomenclature on that truck. And that nomenclature shows by the DOT number a lot about this insured. Based on that DOT number, you can ascertain who operates this truck. You can ascertain what authority they have granted from the government. You can ascertain what their location is, how long they have been in business under that legal entity, what they can haul, and their safety record. This all can be ascertained by looking on the DOT number as the side of the truck. As a part of this presentation to gain CE, we're going to be asking you test questions, and later you will be looking at this as a test question. Beth, you can do it now if you want to. Speaking of questions, if you have any questions that you want me to answer later, you can put on the bottom of the message. Now, if you would look on your page now, just click real quickly the information that you see on the side of this, that the DOT number on the side of the truck gives us, the insurance industry, information about the insured and what they don't show on that. If you spend a minute doing that and email it back to complete it, then that will complete one of the requirements for CE. Thank you, Beth. The next truck is noted on the manufacturer. This is important here to me personally. This truck, that little blue area you see there, is a white manufacturer truck that was bought by GMC, the trade name. When I grew up in the eastern part of North Carolina, my father had a fleet of white manufactured trucks painted red, and they kept saying, look at those white trucks. And I did not know the difference in red and white until I was 14 years old. So trucking has worked me long in my history. And one of the things that we are hopeful for this foundation is once that I can no longer do this, some of the people who take this torch after I do to share this information with you will still tell the story about the white and red trucks. What's a tractor? A lot of people ask that question and they think they plow fields with a tractor. No, the tractor is the power source. It is what the driver drives, it's what the driver sits in. A lot of cases is where the driver sleeps and lives. This is what provides the momentum and the power. The GVWs and the rating and everything we talk about is based on that tractor. But the tractor has no ability to carry something. So to that tractor we must add a carrying compartment, and that carrying compartment is a semi-trailer. They are detachable, and they are connected by two devices. On the semi-trailer connection on the next page is the kingpin. This is a little knob protruding on the bottom of the plate on the trailer, and that plate and that slips into, and that knob slips into the jaws of the fifth wheel. The fifth wheel is attached to the next slide, to the tractor, and that combination is a tractor-trailer combination. So the kingpin is the connecting device on the trailer, semi-trailer. The fifth wheel is the connected device on the power unit, the tractor, and those two match together to give us our big rig. If the power unit tractor does not have a trailer attached to it, this is what we call bobtail. We had a webinar last week from Tom Dickmeyer concerning bobtail deadhead coverages. You might want to refer back to that because there are certain coverages related to a tractor that doesn't have a trailer attached to it. I'll refer that later for coverage consideration. But bobtail is a tractor running down the highway with no trailer attached. Sometimes, even though a trailer is attached, they have no load being hauled. That's called deadheading, or in some cases unladen miles, meaning no loads. These are miles a trucker typically does not get paid for. The object of running a successful trucking company would be to reduce their unladen or the deadhead miles and maximize their revenue by procuring loads both on the outbound and on the back into the terminals or the other places of loading. But deadheading is driving without a load, being paid no revenue, and the tractor, the rig is unladen at that period of time. We look at tractors, and in this case, this tractor has two axles. Yes, your insurers will call them single axle. For some reason, they do not count the front axle. So this is a single axle tractor with one axle on the back. To that, though, we also have to add other consideration, and that's when we add the second set of axles on the back, and that's the tandem. Next slide. Those now we have, instead of 6 wheels of the single axle, we now have 10 wheels on the tandem. So we've added a second series of a second axle and 4 more tires on the back of the unit. And that's the tangle, and that is the tandem operation. Sometimes your insured will have a straight job. A straight job is where the carrying compartment is attached to the power source, to the, in this case, the cabin chassis. There's usually no trailer involved here. In this consideration, one of the things that if your insureds do have straight jobs that cause a difficulty for our insurance industry trying to insure these types of operations is typically straight jobs are used for local delivery, pickup and delivery at a local level. And this increases the exposure in most risk because larger the unit, more congested the traffic. In other words, large units in local operations create more of a problem than the 18-wheelers on the interstate highways. So if your insurers have straight jobs, then you know they're probably doing some local delivery, which you need to then isolate those miles, describe how they're being used in to further the over-the-road operation and doing the local delivery and who's driving them and things like that. Sometimes when the driver has to stay overnight, they carry their sleeping apartment with them. This is the sleep. Folks, this is a large, more robust one than normally has, but you always will have a bed, you'll have a microwave, you'll have a TV. A lot of them now have satellite dishes. A number of them have showers in them, have heaters, have air conditioning, and have a whole lot of home. Depending on how long they have to stay out on the road, they literally live in this sleeper, live in their truck. This is for a number of reasons. One is to keep them mobile so they can be flexible enough to go from location to location, pick up loads. Second one is to meet the hours of service requirements. After a driver drives 11 hours or works 14 hours, they have to stop and rest for 10 hours. Having the sleeper with them maximizes the ability so they can accomplish this required sleep period and without having to rent a hotel room or something else. So the sleeper is there for their convenience, for them to be able to maximize the revenue of their unit by living there, also so that they can easily meet and efficiently meet the requirements of the hours of service after they work for 11 hours, drive for 11 hours or work for 14 hours, then they have to have a 10-hour break. We mentioned earlier about a headache rack. A headache rack is a safety device. Headache rack are used for flatbed operations, and again, we'll give you a picture of flatbed here in a minute. Where we talk about it becomes a little problem, which one you talk first. It's a mandatory safety device for flatbed operation. And the concern we have here is the value of it. It's $8,000 to $9,000. Your insured has to add a headache rack to the power unit here to the tractor. It can be easily removed, so it's not, quote, permanently attached, but it does increase the value of the truck anywhere between 5 and 10%, depending on the age of the unit. The reason it's called a headache rack and is a required safety device is that if that truck is running down the highway and it abruptly stops, the cargo being hauled on the flatbed trailer can come loose, go through the cab, penetrate the cab, and give the driver a headache. So this is a mandatory safety requirement. The types of units you have to have this, next slide, is flatbed operations. Flatbed operations are operations with no trailers with no sides. They're used to haul steel, they're used to haul building material, lumber, plywood, particle board, some equipment, forklifts and front-end loaders, and those kind of equipment, palletized things like sod and rock and stone that's palletized. The problem with the flatbed operation basically is two. The first thing is how to keep the load on. If the load falls off and damages any vehicle or the property outside that trailer itself, that's a liability situation that will fall back upon the motor carrier and their insurer to pay for those damages. And the second part is that a flatbed operation has very low visibility between typically dawn and dusk. So therefore, if they're not properly illuminated, and this is a requirement of FMCSA, and how a flatbed becomes properly illuminated is they must have conspicuity striping. These, as you see here, are the gray and red reflective tape on the side of this truck. This is to give the truck, the trailer, visibility as it runs down the highway, and particularly important at dawn or dusk when you don't have high lighting and you do not have the advantages of headlights and those kind of things. So flatbed operations create a different insurance environment. A lot of times it's low revenue, but you have to be concerned about the load falling off and the trailer being able to be seen at night. Some of your insureds are going to be hauling items that perish. The items that are perishable require temperature-sensitive items, and they would have a problem if the load is not properly kept at a proper temperature. To that end, The motor carrier adds a cooling and heating apparatus to their trailer. This is trademark KT. Here is Thermoking. This is the reefer. This is the refrigeration unit. Again, it's not permanently attached. With 4 bolts and a forklift, we can easily take it off and put it in another trailer with an open area there. It increases the value of the trailer by about double or more. A typical trailer without a reefer unit is $18,000 to $20,000. One with the reefer unit is $45,000. That includes the reefer itself, which is in excess of $20,000, as well as the additional installation that needs to be added to the trailer. Your insureds, when they pick up a load, if it's perishable, will be told by the shipper what temperature the load will have to be held at during the transportation. There are thermometers inside these trailers that monitor on a time-sensitive clock the temperature of the trailer at all times. At time of delivery, when this clock thermometer will be reviewed by the receiving entities to make sure that the cargo was kept at the proper temperature. When you insure these units, not only worrying about the physical damage part of it, as we just talked about the increased cost, the other part of it is the cargo form. Cargo is a property form. For you who have been through Insurance 101, know that most property forms exclude damage done by the change in temperature. One of the things that is available in the trucking market for people who are hauling perishable goods is to be able to buy an endorsement or to have a warranty or to have a policy that does not include that exclusion. Most of these endorsements are called mechanical breakdown endorsements. The key word there is breakdown. The unit itself must break down, which means the insured has an obligation to do at least 3 things: to maintain it, to properly fuel it, and to turn it on and calibrate. And if for some reason during the transportation the unit ceases, breaks down, does not run anymore, and the load becomes damaged because the unit broke down, then that can be a covered cause of loss under the cargo form. But when you write perishable goods, it's imperative that you look at the cargo forms to make sure how they address this change in temperature exclusion and the buyback, if needed, of the mechanical breakdown. Sometimes it's called reefer breakdown. There are certain requirements for maintenance and verifications of it being turned on and other items involved in it. So when you're hauling perishable goods, you have reefers involved, which again requires additional information. If the load being hauled is not perishable, then it's being hauled in something called a dry van. A dry van, as you see here, has nothing on the nose. It has no temperature control. This again, we haul furniture, you haul appliances, TVs, these kind of things. There's no temperature control here, so therefore the loads are not perishable in the sense that they need to be temperature controlled. The unit value here, again, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $18,000 to $20,000. I'm sure all of you all run down the highway and seen laying on the highway these rubber items that look like a gator back. These are where the truck has lost the cap or the top of their tires. This becomes a dangerous situation because obviously now the tires are not strong. There is a problem in braking, and it's a major violation of safety regs and rules if the truck is stopped to FMCSA. So those are what's called road gators, and those are where the tire itself separates and the top of the tire becomes detached from the tire itself and is then laid on the highway. There are 2 types of tires you're insured to use, and some of you might not be familiar with it. Those are the new tires, the tires that might separate. The other one is something called a recap. A recap is a tire that has been worn out, and they put a new tread on the tire. Most of the gators you see on the highway are the recaps that are coming off. A recap cannot be used on the steering unit of a power unit. It can be used on the trailers, which is often, they often are. There are some manufacturers, Baghdad being one of recaps, that actually have been proven to be outlast the new tires themselves. So you need to find out from a safety standpoint about your insurance using that. So this is where you see the road gauge. When we look at a trucking risk, we rate it on something called GVW. That is gross vehicle weight. It's also important for an insurer to understand the gross vehicle weight. The gross vehicle weight, as defined by both the federal government and by the insurance industry, is the gross weight of the unit. That is the weight of the power source, the tractor, the weight of the trailer, the weight of the sleeper, the weight of the equipment, headache rack, reefer, the weight of the driver, and the weight of the fuel. The gross weight, the maximum the truck can haul. There are two other weights that are significant, and on this slide you'll see the second one down is called a tare weight, T-A-R-E. The tare weight is the empty weight. And the difference between the tare weight and the gross weight is the payload, meaning how many pounds can this trailer or tractor trailer haul. And a lot of your insurers get paid based on the poundage or the tonnage being hauled. But the gross weight is the maximum weight of the unit. The tare weight is the empty weight of the unit. For ISO purposes, for you who come from a background of business auto, we look at the next page, and this talks about a light unit. A light unit has 0 to 10,000 pounds. It has 4 wheels in this situation, and is used for local pickup trucks and those things. A medium, next slide, is 10,001 to 20,000 pounds. Here again, we've added an axle to, a tire to the back axle. This unit here now has 6 tires, but notice the tires are still like passenger type tires. The next rating unit is heavy. This is 26,001 to 45,000 pounds. These are, again, a unit with 6 wheels, but notice the tires have become significantly larger and now have the capacity to haul more weight. The last rating unit is extra heavy, and that's 45,000 pounds and above. In this case here, you see we've added the extra axle on the back, which would get it to that extra heavy operation. Some people even haul more loads than what you see here, and in some cases we add what we call the mini axle or another axle to the unit, and that's the next page down. This is an axle you see on the back of this truck. You notice here, if your picture is fine enough, you can see it's up off the ground. This is there for weight purposes. And the whole purpose of the operation is for weight purposes. So when we look at a rig and we see that they have a lot of tires like the next one, the reason they have a lot of tires is to spread the load across the highway. The requirement is imposed by the government, and each state has different regs and rules. In most states, the nomenclature used here is the bridge laws, and what the concern is to make sure that there's enough surface on the tires to properly spread the load over the highway. The typical nomenclature, the typical bridge law weight requirement is 5,000 pounds per truck tire. So if a unit is a single axle with 6 tires, has a truck tire, that would give 5,000 pounds times 6 would be 30,000 pounds, and in our example we just went, that would be a heavy truck. If we add the second axle in the back, now we have 10 tires, and 10 tires times 5 is over the 45,001. So therefore, it would always be extra heavy. One of the easy ways to remember this is when we deal with the GVWs and deal with the rating, your underwriters might want to know, or your insurance carriers might want to know if they are heavy or extra heavy. I do not want to worry about how many GVWs that the insured might know about or not. My concern is how many tires are on the truck or more axles on the truck. If it's a 2-axle truck, then it will be heavy. If it's a 3-axle truck or more, it will always be extra heavy. Again, this gets back to the state bridge laws where a truck can haul 5,000 pounds per tire. And when I'm looking at the axles, we're talking about 2 tires on the back axles. Yes, there's some manufacturers, in fact, I just read in Transfer Topics about manufacturers coming up with the wider tires, the balloon tires, the Ruke tires. They count as 2. So a heavy truck will have 2 axles, an extra heavy truck will have 3 axles or more. The reason here is to spread the load across the highway to meet the weight requirements of the state. One of the misnomenclature, or one of the misunderstandings when we look at auto liability is what is an auto. For you who have come out of the personal lines, know the definition is a land motor vehicle with 4 tires. In the commercial arena and the auto liability policies that are written on behalf of motor carriers, the definition of auto is a land motor vehicle designed for travel on public highways, including a trailer and semi-trailer. In other words, it has no wheel requirement. So when you look at a risk and determining the proper coverage, and the third of these our webinars will be coverage itself. When we talk about auto in the forms we're dealing with, we're talking about anybody from having anything from a moped, like you see in this picture, back to the previous picture with a 72-axle rig. They all qualify as an auto under the auto liability forms. There are 2 very important GVWs. These important GVWs are 10,000 and 26,001. The unit that you see here is a 10,000 or 10,001. That 1 pound makes a slightly difference. GVW. This is, notice it has 6 wheels on it. They're not the large truck wheels. They're still passenger wheels. These are 6. Unit has a GVW as 10,000 or 10,001. The significance of this unit is twofold. The first one is, if your insurance, even a welder, like this location, a contractor, any of these have a unit with 6 wheels and cross state lines, they must have a DOT number, even a private carrier. The second part of it is if it's a private carrier or a for-hire carrier, and they have to meet certain financial responsibility requirements imposed under the Motor Carriers Act of 1980, which is the MCIEF requirement, which is what we'll talk about in depth on the next hour section. They will have the liability attaching of all units the insured operates 10,000 GVW or larger. If they're hauling something hazardous, they would have to have a limit of $1 million. In this picture here, what you see that is potentially hazardous is the compressed gas. Any compressed gas is hazardous. So when you look at this unit, any business that deals across state lines, private or for hire, would have to register with the federal government and obtain a DOT number. And if they're a for hire trucker, or if they're a private carrier hauling anything hazardous across state lines, they would also have to meet the minimum financial responsibility requirements of the Motor Carriers Act of 80, and that is the need for a MCIEF 90 attached to the policy, or the change in that we'll talk about later. Again, that will be next month's webinars. Obviously, things are hazardous, like on the next page, radioactive items. Again, any chemical is hazardous. On the next page. If you notice here, you see these placards on the side of the placards on the side of the truck. Everyone said radioactive, this is flammable or not. Those are called placards. The purpose of those placards on the side of the truck is if there's an accident and there's a cargo spill, then the emergency response parties will know how to deal with the cargo that escapes from this truck. whether they can put water on it or foam on it or how they pick it up, if it can be flammable or not. It's a requirement depending on the quantity the insured is hauling to have their loads placarded or not. For a year later, you will go into some detail in the 4th hour about the regulations for hazmat and things like that. And the violations that can be given out if you're insured for hauling something hazardous and are not properly being handled, then they could be cited for a violation. One of the things that can be cited for is if that placard does not properly describe the load on the truck or the lack of a load on the truck. In other words, if the insured shows that they have something inside the truck that's hazardous and it's empty, they could be cited just as much as if there's something hazardous inside and the placard does not reflect what is hazardous. I don't know about beer being hazardous. We all kind of like beer, but we do know the next page, hauling the beer away can be hazardous. This is the next page there. This is the king of the load, and again, this is a tandem truck and would have to meet the financial requirements of someone hauling something hazardous. I point out that most any trucker could haul something hazardous, we know it or not. And this looks at the next picture of the Coca-Cola truck. The question would have is hauling Coca-Cola hazardous? Well, or the local Coca-Cola dealer you might be able to insure, are they hazardous haulers? Well, clearly they have a placard on the side that would say that they are. Now, I understand that Coke mixed with rum can be hazardous, but you would not think that Coca-Cola dealer would be a hazardous trucker. But they are, and the reason they're hazardous is because of the compressed gas. When you go to a fountain and buy a Coca-Cola, they can be dispensed through CO2 compressed gas, and that compressed gas is what's hazardous, not the Coke in the syrup or the fluid that's coming out. It's the compressed gas that makes them a hazardous haul. So the next page is any compressed gas is a hazardous amount. Acetylene, oxygen, delivering air conditioning, rechargeable items. In fact, I was running, saw a number of times, a number of years ago, I saw a school bus with a placard on the side. Now, I have 3 children and 12 great-grandchildren, so I understand children are hazardous. But what that school bus was hauling that required it to be placarded was handicapped children requiring oxygen. And so it's any hazardous commodity. And then they have to be placarded when they're hauling enough of those cylinders of gas for those handicapped children. But any compressed gas is hazardous. The second GVW is 26,001. Notice here again it's a unit with 6 wheels. But notice the wheels are larger. These are true truck wheels, 1,020, 1,122, maybe even down to 920s. The reason that this is important is a unit this size requires a special driver's license for a driver. That driver's license or a commercial driver's license, it's a CDL, plus the regulations for safety and other things attached to that unit this size. Now, there is no difference in a for-hire, meaning a trucker hauling other people's goods, and a private carrier trucker hauling their own goods, as far as meeting the requirements of the driver being properly selected and having a proper driver's license and the safety regs and rules. It's the local Coca-Cola company, in this case the local Pepsi company, the larger tractor trailer, Schneider National, Swift, or my father, Look Transport Lines. They would have to screen the driver properly, and that requires certain screening of the driver. Again, we'll go through that in the last section of the 4-hour study. So not all driver requirements, but that truck driver would have, or excuse me, that motor carrier would have to make sure that that driver had the proper driver's license, commercial driver's license to drive a truck, 26,001, or if they're hauling people in the next page, if it has more than 15 seats in it. So the people who require a CDL, commercial driver's license, and require certain background checks, screening, including drug testing of those drivers before they can operate that unit. And it's imposed on the owner of that unit. Is in the unit 26,001 GVW or larger, whether it is a Coca-Cola company or a large Pepsi company or a contractor or a large trucking unit, or if they're hauling people, even buses, arriving out of daycare, hotel shuttles. One of the more interesting discussions I had was back when Florida adopted CDL requirements in 1994. I was on the insurance committee of the First Baptist Church in Fort Myers, Florida. At that time, we had a 22-passenger bus, and our insurance committee had to write a letter to the bus committee that anyone who would drive that bus in the future must have a commercial driver's license, which would require that individual to be drug tested as well as random drug testing. It didn't set well with the other people in the church. In fact, it set so wrong with them, we sold the van. But anyway, it's any entity driving, whether you're hauling something or not, whether you're operating or not. If you drive it and meets these configurations, the driver must have a commercial driver's license. Tankers are unique operation. The first thing is there are a few classes of risk that we feel that clearly has more general liability exposure for a trucker than others. Everyone needs general liability. The earlier reefers or drive vans, maybe you could say not as much, but clearly in the case of a tanker, they would. Because here, if you notice, the driver is unloading this tanker by hand. If he or she spilled that cargo as it was being unloaded, that is an auto liability case. If once they unloaded it in the wrong receptacle, and then later that diesel fuel or gasoline or aviation fuel or other chemicals loaded in the wrong tank now being used, that will be GL exposure. One of the most interesting cases that I have been involved in from an expert witness standpoint was a gasoline hauler who was unloading gasoline at a filling station, and a patron of the filling station put a quarter into a vacuum to vacuum their car. That quarter initiated a spark which lit the fumes coming out of the truck, of the tanker being unloaded. And the question was the fumes coming from the truck as it's being unloaded, or is the fumes coming back once it's unloaded into the tank, coming back to the top? Because that's the difference in auto and GL. There's also another misunderstanding in tanker, and that's what's being hauled. Next page. I ask this question in front of audiences, and particularly audiences who do not understand trucking, and say, which do you think is the easier risk to be written, a gasoline hauler or a milk hauler? Obviously, most people would first be suspicious of that question, but second, without being suspicious, would say milk. That's wrong. Much easier to insure a gasoline hauler than a food grade hauler, which is a milk hauler. The reason being is that in the gasoline hauler, that 9,600 gallons of gasoline is contained in compartments. The compartments are 2,200 to 1,800 gallons each. So there's something between that divides that load up called a baffle. If it's a food grade tanker, they cannot be baffled. It has one surface. You cannot have the surfaces to meet the federal FDA requirements. So the problem with a food grade hauler, milk, orange juice, molasses, any food grade liquids, the problem with food grade liquids is that you do not have something that stops the inertia of the load once from, and this is a very technical term, from sloshing around, or gasoline haulers do. In other words, it takes longer to stop a food grade tanker. You have a greater tendency to turn over coming off the interstate highway or food grade tanker because you have the full 9,000 gallons sloshing around with no ability to slow the difference down between the different areas of the tank itself. So that's just a sidelight to know the characteristics of the truck. Auto haulers are unique risk. just read transport copies this week, is that they haven't made a comeback. The problem with auto haulers is not so much the driving of the unit. One of the questions I get asked often is, if unloading the auto, is that still covered under auto liability policy? And the answer is yes, because loading and unloading by hand, and when you drive the auto off the hauler into the dealership or to the auto auction or to the customer final delivered, that's being unloaded by hand. So if the insured gets something in that process, it goes back to the auto liability of the power unit called the load to be unloaded. The biggest concern you have in auto hauler is cargo, because everybody's seen the commercials of Fox for facts about the condition of the vehicle, and the policy repair and replace the unit. But just because the unit has had some physical damage, it might have lost some value in it. And so the demolition of value, lessening value because of it being wrecked or scratched or needed to be repainted because of being damaged in the transportation, creates a conflict with auto liability, with the cargo carrier about how to settle that claim. So if you're involved in auto hauler, you need to make sure you deal with specialty carriers dealing with auto claims for cargo physical damage. Next page, you'll see some risks running down the highway with a forklift hung on the back. A couple things about this. This is for loading and unloading purposes. If that forklift falls off while it's running down the highway, that's an auto claim, just like the hauling fell off. But when they get to the delivery site, the driver gets out, takes the forklift down off of the flatbed and starts operating. Now, if there is an auto claim for that forklift being used to unload the unit itself, the power unit of the flatbed trailer, that is a GL loss. So all flatbed operators need both auto liability and GL, because the loading and unloading of the flatbed by a crane, a front end loader, or a forklift, even a forklift they take with them, is a GL exposure, not an auto liability exposure. Sometimes when we look at a truck for its equipment and determine what kind of equipment, what kind of physical damage value, we need to also understand that our policies we write cover the auto and its equipment. In this case, the cabin chassis is a power source. But to this cabin chassis, we've added a concrete ready mix. We've added 2 other axles with at least 4, if not 8 more tires. And we even have a trailer going to the back to help unload the ready mix concrete barrel of the concrete. All of that is equipment of that truck. So when we deal with our insureds and we try to obtain the proper limit of coverage, and remember the policies you're going to write in this arena will limit your insured's recovery to limit of coverage they choose. That will also be the premium base. And again, we'll get involved in physical damage at a later webinar, not this one. We've got to make sure we address the value of all those items that have been added to the truck. We also have seen those in flatbed operations where instead of having a forklift hung on the back to load and unload, that the unloading apparatus is actually attached to the power source. Here, unloading that unit would be an auto loss because it's being unloaded by an item attached to the power source. And also that apparatus of the unloading will be the physical damage of the power unit itself, the tractor itself, because it is attached as equipment of the truck itself. You'll hear the term intermodal. Intermodal basically are container haulers. There are people who are hauling items that are containerized, usually out of the port, some railroads, some rail, but mainly out of the ports. And these types of risks are local operations. They do require the proper financial responsibility requirements because they are hauling items that are foreign or interstate commerce. They use older trucks and have a more locally delivered. But there's to haul an intermodal and to haul containers, you'll need special coverage to meet the International Intermodal Association requirements. And those require certificate insurance reflecting by car, require certificate insurance reflecting the value, the liability of the value of the container, in most cases covered by federal interchange, as well as the liability for cargo inside that container. This is a growth industry. It's one that you will see a lot of expansion in the near future. It's a good industry, but there's certain characteristics of it. And as you get involved in it, just know that they need certain insurance needs and certain underlying characteristics. I'm sure you all have seen also some trucks running on the highway that have two trailers attached to each other. These are the doubles. These are, again, to maximize the use of the driver and to maximize the value of the power unit. One advantage of these doubles that make it a risk that is less hazardous than others is that doubles can only be used in interstate highways or corridors of the interstate highways. And so, because they can only be used in interstate highways, they've actually turned out to be a fairly preferable type of risk to write. The driver gets a little more pay because they generate more revenue. They can only be used in interstate highways. You tend not to do a lot of lane changing hiring doubles. So they have become a unit that has been favorable from an insurance standpoint, but also very favorable to the insurers so they can maximize the use of drivers and maximize the use of the heavier investment, and that's the power source. We've all had some wreckers running down the highway hauling something. The concern with wreckers, and we aren't going to get into this seminar or this 1-hour presentation concerning the insurance needs of the wrecker, but when you write physical damage, one of the questions you have to ask your physical damage carrier is how a wrecker bill is paid within the policy. We're only talking about wreckers now caused by an accident, caused by a crash, caused by a loss to the power unit. Some carriers will pay the wrecker bills within the limits, but no more than a limit. Some carriers will pay the wrecker bills, period, without having any consideration within the limits or more than the limits, and some carriers won't pay wrecker bills up to a fixed amount. So one of the questions you have to ask all your insurers who have physical damage is, how do they address wrecker bills? This is a major E&O exposure, and it differs greatly in the marketplace. Low buoy operations, these are for the heavy haulers. These are good risk also. The driver typically gets paid more. A lot of these are required to have escorts. Now, not escorts like you think, like reefers. Escorts that have trucks who follow them to make sure that they have proper distances between the unit itself. Typically, they will require to have some overload of the width permits from various states. This will require us to send proof of financial responsibility to the states to meet these requirements. Back to looking on the side of the truck. This tells us a lot. We mentioned earlier about the DOT number tells us who the insurance hauls, who owns the truck, what they haul, when is the insurance renewed. But it also shows us something else on this, and this is leased to Swift. And the important part of this is that Swift does not own this truck. It's owned by someone else. But it's leased to Swift, so Swift is operating this truck just like it is an owned truck by Swift. There are major insurance considerations whether your insurer uses own units or units not owned. This is a major question you have to ask about to insure these units. One of the questions that I don't think the agent does a good enough job, and that's ask the insurer who owns the units that coverage is being requested for. And if it's owned by other than the you, meaning the legal entity who's the name insured on the name insured line, then you need to address coverages for the owners of these units that insured is providing insurance for that they do not own. It can be done by endorsement. It can be done by the motor carrier's form with a proper wording in the contract. There's many ways to address this, but it is important for you to understand from the insurance provider standpoint is, does the insured use units that they do not own that operate as a part of their trucking company, in this case Swift, using this vehicle that's leased to them? And how do we properly screen that driver? How do we properly cover that insurance? And when it's not being covered on the fleet, it's back to the truck coverage that we talked about in the last versus webinar, the non-trucking volatility coverage. So that's the key here. Looking at trucks, we tell us a couple other things here. The portion tag, If your insured has a vehicle 26,001 GVW law, again, 6 wheels, truck tires, and they cross state line, whether private or for hire, they must purchase a portion tag. So you see on the bottom of this where it says a portion, and the requirement of this portion tag is the insured must have a DOT number. And second, when they buy the tag, they tell the state that they're buying the tag, the number of miles during the next year that truck will travel, and the miles in each state that truck will travel. The state then collects the premium for this license plate for this tag, not based on their state requirements for the tag, but based on the percentage of time they'll be in each state. This is required by both private and for-hire carrier portion tags, so the tax distribution collected by the taxing the license plate is not based on where the license plate was purchased, but where the unit was being used. The other thing that's portioned out is on the next page, which is the IFTA. IFTA stands for International Fuel Tax Agreement. This recognizes the truck can haul a lot of mileages and can go through many states without filling up. Therefore, they're using state roads that do not pay the proper payment. Here, like in the license plate, the trucker has to report that this is done quarterly. And unlike the license plate that you report what you plan in the future, this is what you have done in the past. The trucker, the motor carrier has to report both for-hire and private. If the unit is 26,000 GVW large, crossing state lines, they must report to the local tax division all miles they travel in all states and the amount of fuel purchased. And the fuel tax connected to that license, to the fuel purchase, then is distributed to the states that they travel in, not just the state they purchased. Question there? You want to put the question up there? This is another thing that the state wants us to let you know that you have paid attention. Please select one of these two and send it back to us to meet the state. All right, Beth, let's move on. We hear a bird cage. This is the weigh stations or port of entry weight stations that you see running on the highway where the truck has to pull over. A lot of the inspections, particularly inspection level 1s, will be done at this location. Again, the 4th hour of our presentation will talk about these various inspections. So this is where the officers weigh, and this is where the truck is weighed to make sure they meet those weight requirements we talked about, and also release for safety purposes. One of the troubling things today in trucking is the cost of fuel. We've looked at signs back in this page, and you know diesel fuel has creeped up to, say, $4 a gallon. Well, let's look at the truck and look at the fuel. If you look on the side of the truck, you see the big fuel tanks. That tank can hold 150 gallons. And typically there are 2 tanks. And that will be a tank of 2 times 150 is 300 times $4 a gallon. It's $1,200. Think about that. When your driver drives into the truck stop and fills up the truck, they, in a lot of cases, will spend $1,200. How many of these owner-operators, small operation drivers don't have equipment? One of the reasons that the extreme pressure on these businesses is because they need to purchase the fuel before they get paid for the revenue that's generated, and they affiliate themselves with trucking companies or brokers operations who do something for them in advance to the drivers, so they have enough funds to pay the fuel, or if they work for a trucking company that is charging to charge the fuel to the trucking company. But think about one other thing. How many gallons a year do you think it's each? Again, mathematically, typical truck, and this is to make the math simple. You know, the math major cars, and math sometimes dumb it down a little bit. A typical truck will be 6 miles a gallon, and they'll do 120,000 miles a year. So that would be 20,000 gallons a year of fuel that they will purchase at $4 a gallon. It's $80,000. Just read an article in this was Transport Topics about the speed limiters. By reducing your fuel consumption by 10%, by driving less than 62 miles an hour, you can save 10% a year or more in fuel. That's $8,000 a year just for those fuel mileage difference. So governing the cost of fuel is important to the driver. Next picture is my father was a trucker. This is the cab over he had. Top of that truck you'll see the name, how you spell my last name, R-U-K-E. Underneath that truck you'll see a picture of a pickle. My father was the pickle hauler, and he was noted that, and later during the presentations next month on regulation we'll get into that. There are other pictures of trucks you see that tell us a lot. In this case it costs a lot of money to repaint that mural on the side of this truck. That's the equipment of that trailer. So if that truck got damaged, we would have to repaint that mural as long as the limits are enough. However, there's also trucking companies who get extraordinary attention by its sheer name. This is Southeast Express. I know the insurance provider for that, and they would come in Monday morning and having these voicemails on the phone about this 6 truck ran them off the road or not. So you have to be concerned about risk there. And then there are some truckers that you don't want to show a picture of the truck to the jury. And that is, and you see also the jaws in the front of them. You know, that just infuriates the jury. You want to discourage your insureds from doing those things. The key to providing insurance to motor carriers is knowing your customer. We hope this first hour helped you give an overview of knowing the trucker, knowing the type of regs, knowing some of the nomenclature. The next series we're going to do is the government regulation requirements, then insurance requirements, and then the safety regs. We'll build the next hour each to build 3 more hours to the 4-hour seminar. What we have left here on the outline that I encourage you to download is just information concerning these risks and terminology that you can download. I thank you very much for your time today. I hope this is worthwhile. Thank you very much. We're over and out.